Hi, this is Kit, and I am going to review a project that I did recently, which is a microwavable neck warmer. You can see the end product here. It turned out, I think, quite nice. It is filled with cracked feed corn and then a little bit of dried lavender for a nice floral smell out of the microwave. So it fits quite nicely around the neck, and I will show you how I got here. So first thing I did is measure my own neck to just get a gauge about how tight of a circumference I wanted to have for the center circle. I think it was about like 15 inches or so, but I also lay out like the radius of the inner circle and the outer circle in a later video. So I'm just hand sketching to make it pretty rough. And here I'm blocking it with my hand, unfortunately, but I'm actually using the tape measure to get an idea of like how much I want the fabric to kind of pop out and how wide I want it to be. And then I'm using that pulled out to get the width. So after I sketched out what I was thinking of, I wanted to make a cleaner circle. So I grabbed my architect husband's handy dandy circumference and started creating like more neat circles on the back of the page, fighting the curvature of this butcher paper with whatever was around me. So I used that circumference to add in the inner circle, and then later on I used it to add on the outer circle as well, which we'll get to shortly. So spinning the paper around to get that outer circle with the super wide compass gauge. The other thing that I needed to do after I had those circles is I needed to add in a seam allowance. So I added in a 5/8 seam allowance on the inside and on the outside. After I had these seam allowances figured out, I went in and measured the like inner radius of the first circle and then the distance between that and the outer edge. So 1 3/4 and 6 1/4 would get you this kind of donut that I had. Finally, because this isn't like a perfect donut circle, I needed to add in the ends. So I honestly kind of eyeballed where to cut it off, what kind of seemed to make a nice neat piece, and then I used a compass again to have a really nice clean circle at the end finish. It's kind of hard to see with the contrast in the video, but here it is all cut out. You can see how nice that is, how very curved it looks, and I'm ready to move on to fabric. So once again, I am reusing an old sheet of my children's. The fitted sheet started getting a hole in it, so we got a sheet set, and therefore I had a whole twin sheet that I could make into whatever I want, and in this case, a neck warmer. So after I lay out my pattern and pin it down so it won't move, I'm using my favorite washable marker to make the line, and then after the pattern's removed, I go in and I'm pinning so it's obviously a double layer because this is going to be double layered. So I have one, and the sheet folded in half over itself. So I'm pinning the two sheets together so they don't move because it's slicker fabric, so it really wanted to move on me. And then I'm going in over my cutting board and I'm using my radial cutter to cut along those edges, snipping at this point everything that stayed connected, and there you go. It's ready for sewing. So at my machine, using whatever thread was in there, which was black, I hand wrote in a stop point for the hole that I wanted to have in order to obviously turn it right side out and to fill it. So just running along with that 5/8 inch seam and getting close to the finish here. Excuse me. So voila. So before laying this whole thing, flipping it to the right side, I wanted to go in and snip the curvature of both the outside curves and the inside curves so that it would lay flat nicely. So finishing up snipping those inside curves, and it's ready to pop to the right side. So it comes right out, and with a shake you can see it's ready to lie reasonably flat. So there we go. So at this point I was ready to test some grain filling. I'm using some basmati rice, which of course is not the filling that I ended up with. It was what I had in the pantry, and I actually will reuse that rice for cooking later. I also used a canning funnel because that seemed like the simplest way to get the grains in there after using a variety of funnels I have around the house. So I had to snip open a little bit of the seam because it was too tight to fit, and now I'm adding all of my basmati rice that I have in stock, which was about a quart. I had a little bit left in a bag as well, so I used the rest of that up to get a gauge on like how much volume I'm going to need in my final grain in order to do a little bit of research and figure out what price point I wanted to hit. So at this point you can see it kind of half fills with 1 quart. You don't want to fill it so it's bursting, but you want it to be full. Now here I'm going on to the final grain that I picked, which is cracked corn, and then showing off some dried lavender. So ultimately I used like almost 3 quarts worth of volume of the cracked corn. So I expect that's probably what you would get in whatever grain you chose to use. You can see I have a 50-pound bag of cracked corn, which was $8, pretty reasonable price per pound. The reason I got this large bag is I have kind of a second step to this project in mind currently. So I'm filling up the neck warmer with that grain, shaking it out, and I'm going to need to refill that measuring cup one more time, and then again another time. So the cracked corn, I did a little bit of research, and someone had a wonderful blog post that compared all the different filling grains that you can use for microwavable warmers. And cracked corn, or feeding corn I guess, was pretty high on the list, that and jasmine rice. And the cost certainly made this one superior in my mind. Adding the lavender really added a great fragrance when it was microwaved, especially to the beginning, because that all fell to the tips, which are going to be nearer the face of the end user. So filling up the last bit here. There we go. And it is ready to sew shut. Now, I was making this for myself. Yep, showing it off. Yep, there it is. It's partially full. All right, I am making this for me. So I didn't want to do like the best job. I wanted to do a quick job because I wanted to get this done. It's actually like 5 in the morning or so right now. So I just kind of used the same black thread that I had in the machine, seamed it kind of 1/8 of an inch from the edge. It does not look super neat and nice, but it certainly does the job of holding that hole closed. And that was certainly fine for me. I think if you're going to make this as a gift, wink wink to future listeners, or my children, I would maybe consider hand stitching that closure to make it a little bit nicer. It would be easier to disguise in that way. But here we go, snipping that off, and it is ready for microwave testing. Now, the other thing I want to mention is you need to put in a mug of hot water, or else you risk burning your grains and causing a fire in your microwave. You also need to, the first time, try out to see how many minutes you need to warm up your neck warmer. And then once you know, you can just use that time each time. So I did 30 seconds to see what the difference was, then another minute, then another minute. So, 2.5 minutes to 3 minutes was pretty good for me to have a nice warm neck warmer. So at this point it comes out and it is done. It's a fish. So cut to me trying it on. So it didn't have makeup on, so you don't get to see my face, but you can see it sits lovely around my neck. It smells nice. It does have an ugly seam in the back, but it certainly does the job. So please consider making this for a Christmas gift.